Welcome back to the Twono project and to the Obsession Engineering back garden. And today, because I've got something else on the bench, I've got the bike in the garden because I'm going to take the wheels out of it. A little bit of background on that. The other day I got the bike MOT'd, passed with flying colours, then miraculously the baffles fell out of the exhaust. But these things happen. And so next thing I did was insured it and taxed it, went for a little pootle around on the road on it, and it's really pretty cool. But there's a few little improvements, and the first one of those is it needs a fresh set of tyres, because the tyres that are in it are actually date stamped 2009, and they are like riding on wood. So I have a pair of tyres, I'm just going to whip the wheels out of it and go and visit my local bike shop. When I say these are date stamped 2009, all the tyres nowadays have a load of markings on the sidewall, but there's always this, or something similar, and it's the 42nd week of 09. So these tyres are nearly 11 years old. And even after a few miles, they're just rock solid. They won't soften in, so I'm going to throw them in the bin. So to be able to take the front wheel out, I'm going to take the caliper bolts out, remove the calipers from the disc, being careful not to mark the wheel rim. I'll then loosen off the big nut here, crack off these pinch bolts, and then the spindle should just slide straight out of the hole, hopefully. A couple of items I've noticed as I take the brake calipers off. They're a bit dirty. I mean, they're not terrible, but they are a bit grimy. So I will clean them before I put them back on. And the pads look like new, and to be fair, they worked perfectly well when I was riding it. But the nicest thing is, the previous owners put titanium caliper bolts in, and pinch bolts in the fork bottoms. How nice of him. To take the back wheel out is actually even easier. I just undo the big nut if I point to the right thing, and knock the spindle through. The caliper will try and fall out a bit, and then as I take the wheel out, I've just got to roll it forward to take the chain off this sprocket. But it's pretty straightforward, and I've done it 1,000 times. I always wedge my foot underneath the wheel and just support it when I take the spindle out, and that way you've got control of it. That's the wheels out, ready to go off to get tyres changed. I've reattached the brake calipers and bits and just put the spindles back in, just because it stops the calipers having to hang off the brake lines for too long. While I've got bits apart, I will also be changing the chain, because when I measured it with my fancy chain tool, it is a little bit worn, and I particularly dislike the blue. So I'm going to be changing the chain and probably the sprockets at the same time. Before I put the wheels back in it, now they've got tyres fitted, I'm going to clean the calipers because they're quite dirty. Not horrendous, but, you know, dirty. So what I've done is I've taken all the bits out and I've laid them out in order, so I know that is the bolt that's from, in effect, the bottom of the caliper. This one's from the top. This from the outside of the caliper, that's from the inside. So I've laid it out all in order so that I know where it all goes to put it back, because the pads do bed to the disc, so this way I can put them all back in at the original place and it's much easier. So what I'm going to do in here is I'm going to get in here with a toothbrush and some brake cleaner and get rid of as much of the old brake dust and dirt as I can. Then I'll give the pistons a little squirt with some GT85 and push them back in with my fingers so I know they all move freely, and the GT85 just lubricates them so they slide back in. So I shall do them one at a time, make them nice. And yeah, that's easier to do before I put the wheel back in. Some of the ingrained dirt on the calipers is taking a bit of shifting, so I'm just letting them soak a little with GT85. So what I'm going to do now instead is I'm going to attack these pads with this brush. This wire brush is purely for using for cleaning brake pads. I don't do anything else with it so it stays clean. And all I'm going to do is brush over this surface, take out any sort of old brake dust and imperfections, give them a squirt of brake cleaner and put them back in the right order. And then once I've finally got my calipers clean, I shall pop everything back together. That's caliper number 1 done, looking considerably better. There's a few little bits at the top of the calipers and bits that are out of the way, but they're not performance related, and you know, I've got better things to do in my life than spend hours chasing after that. So I've put the clips back in that hold everything. Everything's in there. That's alright, I shall move on to the second caliper. The front wheel's all done now, the calipers are both clean. I've given the discs a wipe over with some brake cleaner as well, made sure everything's nice and tight. So now, ding 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 ding, we move down to the back of the bike. I've actually already done the rear caliper, But the next thing to do is get in there with some degreaser while we have a chance and give all that a clean out before I put the wheel back in. Well, that's looking considerably better. If I really wanted to get the really ground in stuff out of there, probably a little bit of oven cleaner or something would do that, but you're not going to see it, and it's sort of ingrained into the aluminium, so I don't want to get too aggressive with it. But I'm pleased that that's come up fairly well. So before I put the back wheel back into it, I'm going to change some sprockets because it's getting treated to a new chain and sprockets. My preferred method for chain removal is to get an angle grinder, grind off the heads of the old rivet link. Doesn't really matter which link you grind off, but these tend to be slightly softer. So grind the heads off that, then knock a chisel in behind it, and that just pops the side plate off, and then you can just slide the other pins out and the chain basically falls off the bike. And then I can feed the new chain round, and because I have the front sprocket off, I can put the front sprocket on when there's no chain and then just feed the chain into it by hand. That's the heads ground off, so I'm just going to knock the link off with a chisel, then I can take the chain off. That's my new chain fitted. So fitting the new one is pretty much the reverse of the other one, but instead of obviously grinding anything off, I have a tool, a whale chain riveter, that squeezes the plate on, and then you hit it with a hammer and it peens the end over like that. So I've fitted the new chain. I have adjusted it to a reasonable level of slack. I am going by the lines in here as a basic idea, but I've also been in here with the vernier caliper just to make sure they're fairly even on each side. So I'm happy with that. I could do with just going around and giving everything a little bit of a clean. I have wiped the massive excess of assembly grease off the chain so it doesn't fling everywhere. But the next job I want to do before I actually go out and have a little play on it is I want to change this into race shift, which is pretty simple. At the moment it's 1 down, 5 up. I want the other way round. I want first gear up and down for the rest. I find it easier, corner exits, and when you're wheeling through the gears. Not that I do that sort of thing. So all I need to do is swap that so it pivots from the bottom instead. So it's pretty simple as long as my shift rod is the right length. So all I'm going to do is literally unbolt this from here, swap it round so it sits out the bottom, and try and get the lever in the right place. I also found the other day the lever is quite high, so I'm just going to have it so it's sitting a little bit lower. So that's modified that. That now pivots downwards, so it's now up for first, down for the rest. I have noticed it's quite a long gear action. So at some point I may move this up to this hole, but at the moment the rose joints are fairly long, and what I don't want to do is run out of thread on here and have the gear lever, the gear shaft fall off. So I'm going to ride it like this, see what it's like, and if necessary I can get or make a slightly longer shift rod. But for now, really what I ought to do is take it for a ride. So I'm just back from a slightly longer ride tonight, not a massive difference because it was getting a little bit late in the evening. I'm actually still sat on the bike. And what can I tell you? I like it. It's good fun. The engine's great. You can poodle through villages at sort of 2,500 RPM, or you can rev it fairly hard. Not really a lot of point revving it past sort of 8 because it's moving along fairly impressively by then. It's just great. It drives off corners really well. It sits sort of at cruising speed quite comfortably. It is a little bit vibey through the foot pegs and the handlebars at normal cruising speed, but not bad. You could tolerate it easy enough. The brakes are excellent. Don't actually need them that much because there's quite a lot of engine braking. Joys of a big V-twin. The chassis is good. It steers really nicely. It's fairly neutral. You can pick any line you want. The joys of big handlebars, you can just sort of lever it in. I'm not having to move around the bike leaning off or anything. I'll just sort of sit there and sort of, control the rudder. It's pretty good. When I was slightly getting a little more spirited, the rear shock is on the soft side. It's not wallowy, it's just not quite as accurate as I'd like when I'm exiting corners at pace. And on the other side of it, the forks, if anything, are a little bit on the hard side, but you are sat quite a long way back on the bike, so it's awkward to actually load them up as I'd like to normally. The oddity of it being flat handlebars, not clip-ons for me. So, what mods am I going to do? I might try playing around with some of the settings in the shock, a little bit more preload and compression damping to see if that improves it. I will at some point probably take it out and refresh it. I'm tempted to lower the handlebars a bit. What I might do is take out these spaces that are down here. That will just drop the handlebars down a bit. I am tempted to change them for something that isn't gold. The gold is standard, not a vast fan of anodised gold. So I might just try and drop a few mil more sort of weight onto the front of the bike, make it feel a little bit more racy. But in general, this is pretty cool. So yeah, a few little tasks to do, a few little bits to play around with, but that's part of the joy of motorbike ownership. You can fiddle away with these things and make them your own. Thanks for watching, and join me again next time when I do more fiddling on Project Twono.